It is great to be here. It's hard to believe this is my first time. I've had many of you, like Sam and many others, Pagicio down to the farm, and many of you have come to Washington and visited us to be with us. But to be here, I've been, and of course, in Africa many, many times, but Sam's been asking me to come for, gosh, a long, long time. And we'll do it next month, and a year passes, and another year passes, and so to finally get here. And let me say quite candidly, when I sat down here yesterday and you were in process, the first thing I look for is body language. How people kind of responding. That tells you a lot. Words can lie. The lips will tell untruths. But body language, well, that'll tell you a bunch. And the first thing I picked up was, wow, these people, they're like South Carolina people. Down to earth, caring, they're respecting others. You can give and take a little bit, cut the fool, we say, joke around, but be serious when it needs to be serious. And that, to me, are the fundamentals for building a great nation and a great society. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about redesigning an economy, what that means, and then I want to talk about what it means to redesign a society. For those of you who are young people in here, you'll be told many times that you're too young, wait your turn. I was told that from time to time and time again. When I ran for the House of Representatives, I was 20 years old. I was a junior at Clemson University studying microbiology, playing ball, and my career ahead of me was either being a doctor, a pro ball player, or go back to the family business, which was banking. I went home over the Christmas holidays, and I said something to my mom. I said, Mom, I'm thinking about running for the House of Representatives. I'd never even voted before in my life. I wasn't even registered to vote. And she chewed me out. She said, son, it's dirty, it's corrupt, and it'll get you too. You see, her husband, my father, had been in politics. They were at that time divorced, so she'd experienced the brunt end of the life of a wife of a politician. What I didn't know was my father's father, and my father's father's father, and my father's 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 father, and my father's 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 father had been elected in the South of the United States. In fact, 100 years to the day I was elected to the same seat my great-great-grandfather had been elected. I didn't know this until after I ran for the House of Representatives. If you ever want to get a family genealogy done for you, for free, just run for office because the opposition will do it. So I ran for this House of Representatives at age 20. Ran against an old incumbent, very respected, a farmer, and I lived in a farming community. And it was a guy that couldn't be beaten. But as a young person, in spite of being told you're too young, I went out there with the right heart, with the right mind, and people would ask these questions. Were you too young? What do you know about solving these problems? And I would say, yes, I am young. I don't know the answer to all the problems. But I know that we young people didn't cause all these problems. How about let us be a part of the process? Well, that began a career, and I ended up winning by 3 votes. And I remember going to the House of Representatives. We have this beautiful Capitol, very similar to the United States Capitol of design, except a little bit smaller. And South Carolina is one of the original 13 colonies, so to speak. So there's a long history. My family's lived there for about 300 years. And so as I was getting there, there had been all these news reports about this young guy, 20, 21 years of age, a junior from Clemson University, a college student, winning the House of Representatives seat. And you can imagine all the old guys who ran the place. Of course, the media was trying to portray, here's the future, here's this young whippersnapper coming in to stir things up, and here are the old guys thinking, well, we're going to teach him a lesson. And of course, it was front page of the news, and I thought it was fantastic. The old guys thought, this is crazy. But my dad had told me, when you get to the floor of the House of Representatives, look for this man named Saul Blott. He was the longest continuously elected serving political figure in the world. So South Carolina is a state we like tradition, and we don't change quickly. He said, you need to get to know him because he can teach you the ropes. So I'm all excited. I'm walking to the floor of the House of Representatives under the rotunda, and these giant doors open up. There are two sets of doors that enter the outer chamber, then the inner chamber. So those big doors open just for me. I'm so excited. I have arrived. I am it. I'm the guy. And I'm walking in and all fired up and excited, and the next door's open, and there's the chamber, and there I am. And guess who's standing right there? Is Speaker Saul Blott. So this 21-year-old kid goes up, because I'm the guy. I've been in the newspapers every day, and, he's going to be glad to meet me. And so I go to say, hello, Mr. Speaker. And before I get a word out my mouth, he says, son, go get me a cup of coffee. He didn't know who I was. He thought I was a page, a runner, a messenger. Everybody in the entire chamber knew what was going on. Everyone was frozen, solid and silent, watching to see what was going to happen next. And I had two very good choices. One, you old goat, you know who I am. I'm the future. Or two, you want it black or with cream or sugar? And that's what I said to him. He said black. I said, okay. So I turned around. I didn't know where the coffee pot was. I had no idea. And there's this page standing about 10 feet from me saying, so I go get the coffee, and everybody, no one's moving. And I come back in the chamber, take the coffee cup up to the speaker and hand it to him, then you should walk away, right? But I'm not a page. So he looks at me, and body language is powerful because I know what he wants to say. He wants to say, son, why are you still standing here? And before he could say anything, I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm David Beasely. He about died. He was so embarrassed. He said, son, I'm so sorry, gave me a hug, took me under his arms, and taught me the ropes. Because I did something that was not natural for me. See, my natural desire, having been a cocky athlete, played ball all over the United States, it's me. Pride. But if you humble yourself, show some humility, amazing things will happen. I became the youngest majority leader in the United States, the youngest chairman of this and that in the United States, the youngest speaker pro tem in the United States, one of the youngest governors in the history. And so when I served as a young person, you can make a difference. You will be told from time to time, wait, and sometimes you should listen, but sometimes you need to measure why am I being told to wait. But regardless, work hard. When you take the floor of the House or take your position wherever you are, do it with your best. I knew that I had a very serious responsibility because as a young person, if I went to the floor of the House and just blabbered and blabbered and blabbered about every issue, then I would destroy the hopes of any other young person wanting to run because they would lose credibility and you could be like this guy. So I picked my issues very strategically, and when I did speak, I spoke with authority, knowing the subject matter, integrity, and with passion, knowing the facts, standing firm. My best friends in the House of Representatives and the Senate were usually my biggest enemies. Friends would watch us go at the debates from the balcony in the chamber and see us going after it and just challenging each other, but we respected each other and loved each other. I don't have much respect for someone who change their opinion every 15 minutes and you can't depend on them, can't trust them, they don't know what they believe and they can get moved by the wind. But boy, I respect somebody that'll stand firm with me, still respect me, but will stand strong for what they believe in. This is what makes the world go around. This is what makes a democracy work. Respect for others. And so as you can imagine, here I was in my early 30s talking about running for governor and people were like, oh, you're too young and blah, blah, blah. And I started out at 2% of the polls and ran and won. When I was running as a Republican, I'd served in the House of Representatives as a Democrat. I came from one of the most Democrat areas of the state of South Carolina. And South Carolina is about 5 million people. Not quite. Our GDP is about $190 billion. We're going to talk about that. Kenya's is about 70 billion today. But we're going to talk about some ideas, I think, will revolutionize the economy so that your economy will skyrocket. Because I think the hearts in this room are like the hearts of the people of South Carolina. Hardworking, strong values, love of family, and the belief that we can make things happen. And so when I ran for governor as a Republican, never having been a Republican, I had all the Republican candidates that I was running against, all these powerful Republican congressional candidates, congressmen, and this and that, and they were trying to paint me as a left-wing liberal. Then after I won the Republican primary, then the Democrats trying to paint me as a right-wing extremist. I said, you got to make up your mind so I can defend myself one way or the other. And so I ran for governor, won. I have one wife, 4 kids, and everything I do is for them in the future. When I was governor, our economy was one of the worst in the United States. Joe and I were talking about this yesterday. Our unemployment rate was one of the worst. Personal income growth was one of the worst. Agriculture was going down, tourism going down, textile mills were shutting down left and right. Post-Cold War, we were one of the strongest military operations in the country. Naval bases being downsized or shut down. Nuclear weapons production facilities being downsized or shut down. It was really bleak time economically, even though the U.S. economy was not weak at the time, but ours was. But we knew we had tremendous opportunities. I saw when the base closure was taking place that meant thousands of tremendously well-skilled opportunities for a major company to come in and take advantage of it. You can't just cry and whine over the spilled milk. You got to say, all right, God, this is a great opportunity. What do we do with it? But what did we do? We stepped back and said, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? And you've got to be honest about that. You can't fool yourself because these big companies, they're going to know. And so we developed and designed a plan to redesign our economy. And I can tell you, you can go to any country in the world and their plans sitting on shelves. Politicians will go out there and have press conferences. Oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. They put it on a shelf and then nothing ever happens. But we built a team, and the key is a team. We put together a team that would work together as one. And I brought in private sector leaders. The man that began to head up our commerce department was a former banker, one of the most respected bankers in the United States. And we put together a program and a policy that established the mantra of you improve the quality of life by creating wealth through the private sector. You improve the quality of life by creating wealth through the private sector. And so we took this policy, put together a study, and then we put together an execution plan, and then we had benchmarks. And I brought in the entire cabinet and said we're going to redesign our government. And we did redesign our entire government, from the health care to the welfare, to the school systems, to tax policies, to the Commerce Department, you name it. To the prison system, criminal justice system, comprehensive overhauling of all the systems, based upon a theory that you put families first, not government. The best decisions made for families are by families at the breakfast table, not by bureaucrats at a conference room table. We wanted to empower people, to inspire people, so that they could fulfill their dream and not government. Because we believe in the individual. And what we as government should do is create an environment where you can be the best that you can be. And then the only thing will be holding you back will be yourself. So when we began to redesign our economy, we did it in every sector. And we were an economy that was going down, but we realized we had all our eggs in 1 or 2 baskets. Textiles, military. And we knew that we wanted to diversify our economy in steel, automotive, plastics, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, just to name 5. And then we began changing our tax policies for incentives, regulations. I asked every agency to reevaluate every single program policy you had. Is it pro-business, pro-family? Will it help grow our economy? And at the same time protect our environment? And I remember this one particular chief head of an agency went back to his agency, back to his department after this big meeting we had, and he told some of his staffers, this is just politics, he doesn't really mean it, he'll forget about it. That's sort of the standard. Well, I'm a soldier, I'm a warrior. We're here to make things happen. We're not here just to make people feel good. We want to see things happen. My chief of staff heard, we had somebody in the agency called us and said, this guy's not on the team. So we called him in. He didn't know what we had heard. So he comes into my office the next morning at about 9:30. He walks in. I said, Billy, sit down. Governor, that was a great meeting yesterday. Whoa, I said, shut up and sit down. I said, I asked you to reevaluate every policy, program, regulation you have and have a report on my desk in 60 days. But you, it's Tuesday morning, it's 9:30. You've got till Thursday morning at 10 a.m. And if you don't have it on my desk by Thursday morning, 10 a.m., you're fired. You understand that? Yes, sir. I said, well, it's now 9:35. You better get moving. He got up, headed out. I didn't say a word to a single other person, but he did. This governor's serious. They mean business. We started agencies working together because agencies in government will get turf guarding, right? Scott, they'll protect their little silo, their little turf. And we created an atmosphere that we could work together and that everyone had to speak the piece. When my executive team would meet with me, you had to speak your piece. Everybody's voice was equal in that room. And when the decision was made, I'm the governor. But we are a team. And don't say something outside the room that you didn't say inside the room if you don't approve. We want to have an open discussion. Because sometimes I'm not right. I need to hear other thoughts and other ideas. And we began executing this plan. And we went within 2 years from one of the worst economies in the United States to number one in the United States in unemployment, the best. Number one in the United States in personal income growth. Number one in the United States in per capita international capital investment. BMW, Honda, Michelin, Chinese companies. First Chinese manufacturing facility in the United States was in South Carolina. Japanese companies. I got on a plane while we were redesigning our economy and trying to create a better system, that we were also going out in a rifle approach, going to see industry leaders, talking to them. But then you get down to the practical discussion. So when we would sit down, let's say with a burnt pizza street of BMW, my leadership, my chief of staff would call his chief of staff and say, all right, the governor, you were going to meet. And yes, you'll do your hi to the press kind of stuff, but then the governor doesn't want it to be just a normal how you doing meeting. Bring your top team in. We're going to sit down and go through every issue you have. So I would have sitting in my room the head of the highway department, roads and bridges, head of job training, head of the tax department, head of the labor department. Any major issue that needed to be decided, we would sit right there in that room for hours on end, going through. And I knew my strengths and my weaknesses, and I knew my competition's strengths and my weaknesses. And if I had a weakness, I would tell the CEO that, we're not strong there. We are weak. But here's what we can do instead of that. So we start talking in a very practical way. And so if I'm competing against, on this major facility, let's say California. Well, I know California can't get a permit within 3 years because of the regulatory government process. So I know that's a strength of mine. But they may have a greater available workforce. So that's a weakness of mine. So I know the CEO's thinking certain things, and he wants to be polite and nice, but I want to get it all out on the table. And I want to have a very frank conversation. Why? Because I want him to know that he can trust me. Because you go run into problems. Treaties are as good as they are on paper. But if you bond the heart of trust, you'll work through the problems that develop. And so we're sitting there, and one of the first things they said, well, we're going to need the area that we want to go in, we're going to need a road and a bridge that's going to be able to handle this kind of load. Well, to get a major interchange at a major United States interstate intersection could take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. I got my top guy sitting right here. Buck, can we get that road, bridge, can we redesign that entire interchange on a major interstate in South Carolina? Can we do this in 6 months? 6 months, I said 6 months. But 6 months, yes or no, it's not complicated. Can we do it? Yes, sir, we can do it. All right, done. All right, what's next? Then we went through each item. One of their concerns was job training. Could South Carolina provide the sufficient quality and quantity of workers? It's one thing to provide 100 workers, skilled workers. It's another thing to start providing 1,000 or 2,000 skilled workers to make a high-quality performance automobile. So he wants to know, can he get a world-class car built in a state that he doesn't know about? So I've got my job training guys, and we begin answering every single question. Now, we don't have time today, but we have little things that we do and we did that CEOs would just stand back and say, I've never seen anything like this. And so when we brought in the BMW, or brought in the Honda, little short story on Michelin. Francois Michelin was a friend of mine and became a great advocate for South Carolina. And we had tremendous Michelin presence in our state, and Mr. Michelin had sent his number one guy, Carlos Goin. I don't know how many of you know Carlos, the head of Nissan and Renault and world-class CEO, Brazilian by ethnicity. Brilliant guy. So Carlos comes to see me privately. No one would know, because wherever the top guy kind of goes, the press is watching to see where there might be the next tire plant or the next BMW plant, and you know, it sparks news and controversy. And we kept all this stuff very confidential because we didn't want anyone to know, because the success will come at the end. And also in the team building, in my state, and you should do the same here because it's critical, don't take all the credit. Bring your opposition leaders in. Have them part of the team. This is very important to CEOs because they want to know, if you're no longer in office, how stable is your government? So I had my Democrat leaders in the House and the Senate all engaged, all involved, and I gave them just as much credit. And there was incredible trust. I would bring them in, we would talk about these things confidentially. We would talk about the funds that I needed for building roads and bridges and for job training, and so we can make decisions on the spot. So a CEO would know that, wow, they don't put up with red tape here. And so Carlos and I were sitting down privately. He says, Governor, you know, Mr. Michelin really loves you in South Carolina. I said, I know. I love him. He's like a father and a brother. He said, well, we're going to put 4 new facilities in North America. And we want you to know that one of them, no matter what, is going to your state. I said, Carlos, that's great, but I don't want one. He said, what? I said, Carlos, I don't stutter. I said, I don't want one. He was flabbergasted. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. I said, Carlos, I want you to listen to me very closely. I want all 4 of them. He then laughed and said, Governor, you know I can't do that. I said, oh, yes, you are. You're not leaving this room until I got all 4. Now, take your coat off. Let's get down to business. We sat down and negotiated and this and that. Well, within 3 hours, we had 4. Wow. We changed our economy. We changed our school system. We changed the way of life. But we had the fundamentals strong. We had good people that had good hearts. And I think Kenya's well positioned, as I've been seeing and just experiencing already. Small things that I've been picking up. And the few things that I've read in my limited time. Port, a people whose heart is ready, desiring to do good things, get down to the fundamentals, and look at those states and those governments and those private sectors. What did they do to make it happen? And learn from that. But know that you've got your unique culture, your unique ways. And obviously you got to address certain fundamental things. And this is where you got to be honest with yourself. And know that you can't solve all your problems overnight. But begin. A CEO is going to know your strengths and weaknesses are probably as good as you are. And he just wants to know, are you dealing with your weaknesses? Are you trying? That's important. We could spend a lot more time into that, but I think I've just given you a flair. But what happened to me politically? Y'all remember the story about the Confederate flag? How many of you know anything about the Confederate flag? Well, as they would say, I'm the last living casualty of the Civil War. I said we should take the Confederate flag down. Now, that might not seem to be a big thing to you, but that'd be like saying you would take Mary out of the Catholic Church. It just ain't going to fly good with some people. But I felt it was something that should be done. And it ended me politically. It was an amazing, phenomenal debate, but it was something that should and must be done. I'm not going to dwell on that right now because this is only relevant to the next story. The night I lost in 1998, at that time, the national media, the next possible president was going to be George Bush or David Beasely or Frank Keating, Tom Ridge, these young dynamic governors who were changing the face of America. So when I lost that, you can imagine what the media was thinking. I was head of all the governors at the time, Republican governors, which were 32 out of the 50. So I was sort of the guy. So the night of the election, what do? Go up there and say that they bought the election, condemn them, or that's what my staff wanted to do, and all my experts, pollers, they look, you'll come back, and this and that, and I went and tried them with my heart to congratulate the guy that won. He and I have become really good friends, and told the people I thanked them for letting me serve them. And now let's pray for this governor. In the next few months, I got letters from some of my biggest political enemies saying, I always hated you. You were always this right-wing Christian, but I always thought you were cocky and arrogant. But the night of your defeat, you changed my life. Sometimes when you're your weakest, you're your strongest. Sometimes when it looks like, from the world's perspective, you're down and out, God's got you up and in, strong, in ways that transcend man's way of thinking. And so I brought my team in that night. I said, I want to ask you three things. One, did we do what was right? They said, yes. Second, did we do what was right when it was right to do it? Because a lot of politicians and folks will stand for what is right when it won't cost them anything. You got a lot of preachers will do that. And they said, yes. I said, third thing, when we stood for what was right, at the right time, did we do it the right way? Out of judgment, condemnation, lying, deception, or out of love and mercy and honor and truth? They said, yes, we did that too. I said, then we've been successful. We've been obedient. And that's all that matters. Well, it made them feel good for about 10 seconds. But it was the truth. A month later, my wife gave birth while I was still governor. And this is right before Christmas, because the elections are in November. We got a little election coming up in the United States. Let's don't even go there right now. No matter which side you're on. And so a month later, my wife, and she comes from an Alabama family, and those women down there, they live to be 100. They never get sick. They're amazing. And this little old 5'1" lady had her fourth child, named Ross, and 30 minutes after the delivery, she started feeling a little sick. nauseated. The nurse thought, well, this is the first lady, we better make sure. Took her back. Doctor said, probably nothing. 3 hours later, three doctors walk into the room with me by myself and tell me she's going to die. Not that she's not doing good, but she's going to die. She had amniotic fluid embolism. 85% of the women that get that die. Of the 15% that survive, 86% of them had brain damage. I didn't know these statistics until later, but she was in a coma, and days later she does come out of it and unharmed, unscathed. But that hour, when those doctors left the room and I was there by myself, I go to the window and I am furious with God. How can you do this to me? Did I not stand for truth and what was right? You laid me bare naked in the public square. If that's not bad enough, now you're going to take the mother of my 4 children, my best friend, my wife. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Why are you doing this? And I'm not a scripture scholar. But all of a sudden this verse that said from Job, it says, though you slay me, Lord, I shall trust you. This peace came upon me beyond any man's understanding. It was that simple. Lord, I'm yours. Everything works for good. And I think what he was doing looking back, he was saying, I don't want you now out of politics. That's a whole other story. I've got other things for you to do. And I think this was a way of him sort of putting the jumper cables on me and shocking me a little bit and say, hey, you've been there, done that now. I want you to focus on your family right now. And I have. And my 4 children, they love the Lord. And I spend time with them in the scripture. My wife and I pray with them. If you're not doing that, you should. You see, one of the greatest, I don't remember who it was yesterday, was talking about the 2 great commandments, love God and love neighbor. But that love God, I've asked this to a lot of preachers and seminaries, where is that? They say, oh, that's in Matthew, or that's in Luke, or that's in Mark. I said, well, there was no Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Where is it in the Torah? Deuteronomy 6th chapter. Hear, O Israel, your Lord your God is one. What does it say? It's God talking to Moses. Diligently teach your children to love me with all the heart, mind, and soul. When? On Sundays? No, I didn't say anything about that. Every day. When you get them up in the morning. When you put them to bed at night. When you sit down and have a meal. When you're walking along with them. That's your responsibility. It's not the preacher's responsibility. It's your God-given responsibility as the father and the mother of a child to raise them in the values of God. So Jesus comes along. And people want to talk about the cross, and it's a magnificent story. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 80 to 85% of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is a whole different story than just the cross. You see, in John chapter 17, when Jesus says, Father, I have finished the work that you sent me to do. He ain't gone to the cross yet. That finished work can only be done by Jesus the Christ. We can't replicate that. Well, what's this other finished work that he's talking about? Which is 85% of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And that's the training of the men and women of how to love God and love neighbor, of which all the law and all the prophets stand. Eternal salvation, Jesus says, is based upon loving God and loving neighbor. Is that not what he says? I've gone to the seminaries. I said, how do you inherit eternal life? Some of the greatest evangelical seminaries in the United States. And I'll walk in, they think I'm going to be talking about politics, and I'll use you imagine, I love to stir it up a little bit. I want people to think. Get out your comfort zone and think. And I've gone in and said, I'm going to talk to you today about the difference between the teachings of Jesus and Christian tradition. And you can imagine the professors will sit up like this, and So I asked these students, how do you inherit eternal life? And they went through the 4 spiritual laws, or whatever the case may be. Could be which group you are, 5 or 6, or this or that. And I said, wow. Oh my goodness. Boy, have I made a mistake. They said, what do you mean? You know, because I'm the poster child for the Christian right in the United States in politics. I said, well, I didn't know Jesus was wrong. They said, what do you mean Jesus is wrong? I said, well, Jesus was asked this question, how do you inherit eternal life? And he said, love God, love neighbor. They said, yeah, but you got to explain it. I said, I got to explain Jesus' answer? I said, I'll tell you what, I want you to explain your answer in relationship to Jesus' answer. I said, because I have a rule of thumb that whatever Jesus says, it ends the debate. Because Jesus says all the law and all the prophet hangs on these two. Love God, love neighbor. Deuteronomy 6 and Leviticus 19:18. All the law and all the prophets. So every single verse and story you read in the Gospels, in the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament, must be read in light of how does this help me better understand how to love God and my neighbor. In fact, the Kilimanjaro verse of all verses, Matthew 7:12, when Jesus says all the law and all the prophet, actually hangs on this one. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you would think, well, that appears to be a contradiction. No, because Jesus was asked the question, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength. And then he says, the second is like it. It's the same. You remember that time when they came up, Jesus, when did we help those people in prison? When did we feed those poor people? He says, when you did it to them, you did it to me. You see, when you're loving your neighbor, you're loving God. How is that theologically? You know that verse, love your neighbor as yourself? If you go to the ancient Hebrew, you know what it really says? This is powerful. Why? Because every human being is made in the image of George Bush or Barack Obama. Every human being is made in the image of the Almighty. So Leviticus 19:18, the ancient Hebrew, what it really says is, love your neighbor as your equal. How can that be? Because you're made in God's image. You're made in God's image. You see, you and I want to see black guy, white guy, brown guy, tall guy, short guy, Republican guy, Baptist guy, Catholic guy. The Catholic Jesus doesn't even talk to the Baptist Jesus. The Baptist Jesus doesn't talk to any other Jesus. I come from a Baptist background. Anyway, I can joke about my friends. But you get the point. So Jesus says, all the law and the prophet hangs on this one teaching, love your neighbor as yourself. And by the way, you can't do that. You just can't quite do it. I am the way, the truth, and life. Apart from me, you can't do anything. What does anything mean? It means anything. So in South Carolina, we were taking down this flag. And about a year ago, I had gone back to the same chamber that absolutely humiliated me publicly with the flag and tormented me and going against me, the Senate. What happened 2 years ago, if you recall? This white dude walked into this black church with a preacher who was a senator, someone that I'd mentored, this black guy, great guy. On a Wednesday night Bible study, this white dude who wrapped himself in the thoughts of the Confederate flag walks in and shoots 9 black people. Ruthless murder. You'd already seen riots in Ferguson and Baltimore. Did you see riots in Charleston, South Carolina? Didn't happen. Now, what happened 2 days later? 3 days later. Those families went on international television and forgave that racist, murdering white kid. I got phone calls, emails, texts from friends all over the world. Buddhists, Hindus, Shia, Sunni, Catholic, Orthodox, stood in absolute awe
of what probably was the most powerful gesture they had seen in their lifetime on earth. Unconditional forgiveness and love for someone who did not deserve it. Jesus said, lift me up and I'll do what? Draw all. How do you lift them up? In love. It's the most powerful weapon in the history of the world. It's what Napoleon said. He and Charlemagne and Caesar had conquered nations. How? By force. But the followers of Jesus who lay down their lives have changed the world through the most powerful weapon, love. So I walked into this Senate hoping now and begging and pleading in my heart to God that there'd be a change of heart. And I walked into the Senate where they had a colleague who'd been killed. And I walked into the Senate, didn't know what was going to happen. And I walked in, they stopped the debate. And they all stood up and looked at me and gave about a 5-10 minute standing ovation. What did that tell me? Their hearts had been changed. I was brokenhearted. It was tough. I was so happy and so, I don't know how to say it. It was amazing. What the devil means for evil, God will use for amazing good things. So I then knew I had the Senate. The Senate was going to vote right? So I started heading over to the house. Wasn't no use to wasting time with those guys. They're with us. They're going to get it done. So I'm walking over to the floor of the house, under the rotunda, and it's packed. You can imagine the controversy, the tension in the air. And I saw this guy about 6'5" or 6", who'd been one of my biggest supporters in the state of South Carolina, who'd become one of my biggest enemies after I said take the flag down. And he sees me. He's coming right at me. I said, this is not going to be good. And he gets to me and says, Governor. I'm like, okay. He says, I want you to know something. He said, my heart was broken. Well, I didn't quite have the Jesus spirit on me at the time. I said, well, what broke your heart? The ruthless murder of those 9 blacks by that white racist kid because of that Confederate flag? He said, no, that broke my heart. Then I kind of felt bad. I said, well, what changed your heart? He said, when those victims, those families stood up and unconditionally forgave that young man, he said, that changed my heart. That's the power of love. That's the power that Jesus is talking about. And so he spends 3 years teaching us how to love our neighbor, how to love our enemy. He says one man with God is the power of 1,000, right, in Deuteronomy. 2, the power of 10,000. You see, God's ways are not man's ways. If you want to be first, you need to be last. Try that out. Say, hey, I'm willing to lose for the common good. Say, I'm willing to be publicly humiliated for the good. It doesn't feel too good in the press the next day. Jesus' ways aren't our ways. And you don't get it just overnight. I mean, Peter and James and John and Thaddeus, Thomas, Bartholomew, Philip, and all those guys, and yes, and Mary and Martha, Susanna, Joanna, just to name a few of the women. They were with Jesus for quite a while, and they still weren't getting it. You remember they were on the boat, and they had one little loaf of bread, and they weren't about how they were going to feed each other, and Jesus is over there acting like he's asleep, and finally he just says, this is the Southern translation. He's thinking, God, what were we thinking when we picked these guys? Guys, you worried about how to feed your 12? How many did we feed with 5 loaves? I think that's 5,000. How many did we feed with the 7 loaves? 4,000. Now, if you go do the logarithm or the algebraic equation, with 5 he fed 5,000. With more, he fed less. With 1, you do the math, I don't know what it would be, probably 100,000. You see, Jesus is telling you, apart from me, you can't do anything. I want you to die to your way of thinking because you can't do it. And the less of you, the more of me, the more we're going to do. And he's proven that with the loaves of bread. But this is where it comes home to you and to Kenya. He didn't go to Washington, D.C. to say, we're going to change Kenya by all the leaders in Washington, D.C. He didn't say to Peter and James and John and these guys, we got to go to London and Paris and get the best and brightest and bring them here to show us what to do. What did he do? Because he knew that apart from me, you can't do anything. So he went and got what? Guys and gals in the neighborhood. He said, we're going to change Galilee and Nazareth in the Middle East from friends in the neighborhood. All you got to do is love me and be a band of brothers and be one mind and one spirit, and we'll change the world. You see, when Jesus came along, 3 out of 5 people in the Roman Empire were slaves. You had a corrupt Roman Senate, Roman emperor. Jesus comes along, did he say, we got to change the emperor, change the Senate? Boy, overhaul the system of laws. If we do that, we're going to change the Middle East. We're going to change the Roman Empire. He didn't do that. Was he not concerned about those things? Of course he was. But he knew that changing one more senator, one more governor, one more president, one more set of laws, as good as that is, wasn't going to address a greater, deeper, systemic problem. There needed to be a transformation of the human heart, starting with you and me. So he began 3 years of discipling Peter and James and John, teaching them how to die to themselves and teaching them how to love God and love neighbor. And he said, boys, if you want people to know you're my disciple, you don't have to say a word. All you got to do is love one another. By this the world will know. Why? Because the laws of creativity. If I let this go, what happens? It falls. Why? Because of the laws of creativity. We put a word with it called gravity. That's a seen reality. But in the unseen reality, there are also laws in effect. We lift him up in our lives. By this love, people are drawn. So people, when they see you having this spirit of camaraderie and fellowship, they're drawn to it. They're attracted to it. Why? Because the number one problem in the world is not racism and crime and rape and murder. It's brokenness and loneliness, which results in all these other things. Brokenness in relationship with God. Brokenness in relationship with your dad, your mother, your brother, your sister, yourself. And so Jesus is teaching, guys, with one of you follow me, it's the power of 1,000. 2 of you, 10,000. But you know you got to hold each other accountable. Iron sharpening iron. Brothers helping brothers. And what happened? The Roman Empire was changed. But what happened? Started getting religious. I got to be in charge over here. Oh, this religious theology. Create division. God says be one. Is he and the Father one? Jesus said to call yourself what? Baptist? Christian? Muslim? Hindu? Republican? Democrat? No, he didn't. What did he say to call yourself? Brother. Sister. Friend. So when I sit down with a despot dictator, I see someone made in God's image who needs God's love. That's going to do more to change him than any policy from the European Union or the State Department. He needs somebody to love him. He's had enough people condemning him. That ain't working. I've seen leaders weep because you walk in there and give him a hug and say, I'm praying for you. Whoa. Is he a bad guy? Oh, yeah. I'm probably just as bad in God's eyes. And I've had people say, well, I can't believe you prayed with this guy. And I could name some folks in your neighborhood around here just in terms of this part of the world that we prayed with. And how could you pray with that guy? I said, the next day, maybe he ordered the execution of 10,000 people. I said, maybe if we hadn't prayed with him, he'd have ordered the execution of 25,000 people. Who am I? I'm not. But you see, Kenya is well positioned. The fundamentals are there. You've got the answer right here in this room. Yes, we are here to give thoughts and ideas and where we've made our successes and made our mistakes, but your answer is above and in here. I can feel it. Joe can feel it. We all can sense this desire, but you're going to have to first disciple yourself. Die to your way of thinking. God's given you incredible talent to see what works and doesn't work in the world in terms of systems of governance, of healthcare and education and all these things, but the heart is the most powerful weapon. I have seen societies where you've got the best system of government in place with the wrong hearts, and it won't work. You can take the worst system of government and structure with the best hearts, it'll work. The best is have both, the best of both. But while you're working to change your system of laws, be loving your neighbor. One of the things I've been encouraging our leaders in the United States, and I have really rebuked and fussed at some of my friends in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, and some of my friends and governors. I said, your problem, because they're so frustrated, they're so upset, they're so disillusioned, Democrats and Republicans. And my Democrat friends, who I don't agree with on hardly any issue, I know they love America, and I know they want to do what's right. We just have a different perspective. But some of our colleagues, they think that the only way they're going to change America is by more legislation in Washington. It is totally untrue. If that's the case, then Jesus' model doesn't work. And we know it works. So I'll tell my Democrat Republican friends, I said, your problem is you think that's the only way. And you say you love God, but well, you don't really believe Him, do you? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, Jesus changed the world without passing a single piece of legislation. He never ran for political office. I said, what if you got a couple Democrats and you got a couple Republicans and y'all had a press conference and said, folks, we might disagree on abortion or gay rights or this, but you know what? We're going to be one. We're going to walk together in the streets of Detroit, and we're going to do our best walking together as Democrats and Republicans and helping the poor and the needy. Even though we got difference of policies in Washington, we got the same hearts with one God. Let's go out and help the poor and the needy in our own individual capacities. Wow. Can you imagine what the gangs in Detroit would think if they saw that? Because what they see is what? Tribes. This tribe doesn't like that tribe. This group doesn't like that group. The Baptist doesn't talk to the Catholics. The American people, like most people around the world, fed up a divisive religion and divisive politics. But when you lift up Jesus, wow. And do it first with love and deed and then in word. You want to earn the right to be heard by a Muslim? Love them and call them brother. And don't try to convert them. I never try to convert anybody. And you shouldn't either. It's beyond, above your pay grade. I disciple them. I'll tell Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and atheists. I cannot begin to tell you how many atheists. I'll sit down and say, I'll never try to convert you, but I'm going to talk to you about Jesus. I want to disciple you in His teachings. I said, wouldn't you like to learn about how to help the poor and the needy, how to love your enemy? Yes. I said, well, let's spend the next couple of days talking about that. Well, there's a powerful spirit up there that'll change their heart. You see, I don't want them to convert from one religion to another religion. I want them to convert their heart to the Almighty. And then call me brother and sister. Yeah, if you want to be called Baptist, and whatever, that's up to you. But I'm trying to stick to the way Jesus talks, the way He thinks, the way He acts, the way He loves. I need help. I need brothers and sisters like you to hold me accountable. Your answer is here. The hearts in this room that God has given you. The inspiration. I'm here as a cheerleader to cheer you on. And so thank you for being a band of brothers like Peter and James and John and Thaddeus. You'll have your differences, but work them out by the time the day of the sun sets. But continue on in love for your nation, putting yourself last. Put others first. Be pure at heart. Be willing to sacrifice the basic tenets as a follower of Jesus of loving your neighbor as yourself. God bless Kenya.
Thank you, Governor.